The silence was the worst part, not the quiet of a calm house, but the suffocating stillness after the power was cut. I remember sitting there in the dark, the faint glow of my cracked phone screen the only light. My son, Leo, was whimpering in his crib. His formula was gone, and my pride was a distant memory. I had a family, one with more money than they knew what to do with. But they had disowned me the moment I chose my own path. They saw me as a mistake. In that moment, I looked at a number I had saved years ago, one they'd never approve of. I wasn't texting a wrong number. I was texting my last hope. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Elena, and I sat on the cold kitchen floor. The linoleum, a shocking, numbing contrast to the sudden, feverish heat of my shame. My knees were pulled up so tightly to my chest they ached. A physical representation of how small I felt, how desperately I wanted to shrink out of existence. The threadbare blanket, a relic from a time when my life felt full of promise, offered no comfort, just a scratchy, thin barrier against a chill that seemed to emanate not from the floor, but from deep within my own bones. The world outside was a hollow echo of its daytime life, the distant wail of a siren, a desolate cry in the darkness, a lonely sound for a lonely night. It was past midnight, that liminal hour when all hope seems to have gone to bed, leaving only a bone-deep weariness behind. The can of baby formula on the counter was an empty, metallic ghost. I stared at it, and it stared back, a silent accusation, a monument to my failure as a mother, as a person. It was the last can, the one I had rationed, measured out, and diluted with a futile prayer that it would last just one more day. My son, Leo, was crying from his crib in the next room. His cries weren't the demanding wails of a colicky baby, but a small, persistent whimper, a sound that clawed at my chest, a physical ache that was almost worse than hunger. He was hungry, and all I had to offer was a bottle of mostly water, a pathetic, impotent offering. My mind, usually a jumbled mess of worries, had become a cold, calculating machine. How much did I have left? A few dollars? Maybe. Enough for a loaf of bread. Not a can of formula. How much did I need? $50. A fortune. The crushing weight of having nothing, of being a failure, was a physical pressure, squeezing the air from my lungs until I felt lightheaded with despair. My thumb hovered over my brother Ben's contact. The familiar name was a trigger, a painful reminder of a life I had left behind. He had helped before, yes, but it came with a price. Not a financial one, but an emotional toll far heavier than any loan. It was the silent judgment in his eyes, the subtle shake of his head, the pursed lips of my mother. It was the unspoken, "I told you so," the constant, grating reminder that I had walked away from the carefully constructed life they had built for me. A life of security, of predictability, of a loveless marriage to a man my parents had chosen for our family's future. I couldn't bear to ask him again. The thought of hearing the disappointment in his voice, of seeing it in his eyes, felt like a punishment I wasn't strong enough to endure. But tonight wasn't about my pride. It was about Leo's survival. My son's small, vulnerable body depended on me, and I was failing him. The shame of that was an acid in my stomach, a burning, corrosive feeling that ate away at my self-worth. My hands were shaking as I typed the message. The words felt clumsy, inadequate, a pathetic plea. "Ben, I'm sorry to bother you again. I need $50 for formula. Leo's almost out. I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back. please. I didn't double-check the number. I just hit send. The click of the button a final, desperate act. I set the phone down and dropped my forehead to my knees. The world outside disappearing, replaced by the persistent, painful ache of failure. I felt like I was back in high school, asking my parents for money for a school trip. But this time, the stakes were impossibly high. This wasn't for a new dress or a night out. This was for my son's survival. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Each second was a lead weight in the pit of my stomach. A waiting game I was losing. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. The sound made me jump, my heart hammering against my ribs. I picked it up, expecting a terse, disapproving reply from Ben. I was ready for it. A fresh dose of humiliation to add to the night's cocktail. Instead, the message read, "I think you have the wrong number. Who is this?" A wave of dread washed over me, a physical sickness that made my head spin. My heart sank, and I felt a fresh sting of embarrassment. A new layer of shame on top of the old. I had a wrong number. I was so desperate, so broken, so unhinged by fear and exhaustion that I couldn't even manage a simple task. My hands fumbled on the screen as I typed my apology. "I am so sorry," I wrote, the words feeling pitiful and small. I was trying to text my brother. "Please ignore my message. So sorry to bother you." The reply was instantaneous, a sharp, cold jab of reality. "This is Alexander Vanderbeek, and I don't think you meant to text me." My blood ran cold. My mind went blank, then raced. The name a shock of recognition. Alexander Vanderbeek. The name was impossible. He was a myth, a legend, a man on the cover of magazines, the subject of gossip columns, a man who moved in a world so far from mine it might as well have been a different universe. My shame burned hotter, a fire in my cheeks. I wanted to disappear into the floorboards, to pull the blanket over my head and never come out. "Please," I typed, my fingers fumbling. "I'm so sorry, I'll just delete the message." But another text came through, stopping me in my tracks. "Don't delete it. Tell me about your brother. Tell me why you didn't call him." He didn't offer me money. He offered me something far more valuable in that moment: an audience, a listening ear in the vast, empty night. So I told him. I poured out my story in a torrent of text messages, a confessional to a stranger. I told him about my family, the way they saw me not as a person, but as an investment, a valuable asset to be traded in a market of power and status. I told him about the carefully planned arranged marriage, the man they had chosen for me, a man whose family would boost their own standing. I told him how I had walked away, how I had chosen a different life, a life of my own making, a life of freedom, of loving the man I chose, a life of being a mother to the child I chose to bring into this world. I told him about the day they had cut me off, about the silence that followed, a silence so complete and final, it felt like a death. I told him about the constant, gnawing feeling of being a disappointment, a failure. I poured my heart out to a complete stranger, a man who had more money than I could ever imagine. And in return, he listened. He didn't reply immediately. The silence stretched. And for a moment, I thought he had lost interest, that I had bored him with my small, pathetic life. But then a new message popped up. "I'm sorry about your family," he wrote, "but I'm a man of business. I'll make you a deal. I will send you the money for the baby formula, and you will give me something in return. I need an honest opinion from someone who understands what it's like to be on the outside." I was suspicious, a part of me screaming that this was a trap, a cruel joke. But a deeper part of me, the part that was a mother, knew I had no choice. The world had shrunk to a single, terrifying question: how to feed my son. The thought of his hungry cries was an anvil around my neck. I had to feed my son. The money appeared in my account within minutes. A surreal, almost unbelievable number. The next morning, I went to the store, my heart pounding with a mixture of relief and a creeping unease. I bought enough formula to last a month. Then, I went to Alexander's office as he requested. I showed up in the only clean clothes I owned, a simple dress that had seen better days. The hem slightly frayed, the fabric thin and worn. His office was on the top floor of a skyscraper, a space so vast and luxurious it made my tiny Brooklyn apartment feel like a different planet. The view from the window was a breathtaking tapestry of the city, a view I had only ever seen in movies. Alexander was there, a handsome, intimidating man in a perfectly tailored suit. He was taller than I expected, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to see right through me, not just at me. "I don't need a financial advisor," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I need an advisor on family." He explained that his own family, also wealthy, saw his success as a threat. They were constantly trying to undermine him, to prove he couldn't do it on his own. He showed me a file, a complex web of financial transactions and coded messages. He told me he suspected a major embezzlement scheme but couldn't find the proof. "I need you to tell me what you see," he said, not as a financial expert, but as a person who knows what betrayal looks like. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw a loneliness in his eyes that I recognized, a reflection of my own. I spent the next several days in his office, poring over the files, my apartment, my life, faded into the background, replaced by a new reality of spreadsheets and legal documents. I wasn't a financial genius, but I could read people. I noticed the tiny details, the subtle shifts in language, the way certain names and dates appeared in strange places. It was like solving a puzzle, one with a human element. I realized that the people embezzling money from him weren't outsiders. They were his own family, the ones who were supposed to be on his side. The irony was not lost on me. My own family had cut me off, but his family was actively trying to destroy him. I identified a series of shell companies and fake transactions, all leading back to a distant cousin who was on his board of directors. The betrayal was so complete, so insidious. It was almost elegant. I realized then that my own family's betrayal was simple and straightforward, a blunt, cruel act of rejection. What he was facing was a surgical, calculated act of malice. As a test, Alexander invited me to a charity gala, an event where my own family would be in attendance. He told me to come as his associate, to observe and report. I was terrified. The thought of seeing them, of being in the same room, made my stomach churn with anxiety. But I was also determined. My debt to him and to myself was not yet paid. I showed up in a borrowed dress, feeling like a fraud, a Cinderella in a costume. But I held my head high. The air in the room was thick with money and power, a world I had once been a part of, and one I had willingly left behind. I saw my mother and my brother across the room. My mother saw me first, her face freezing over. The forced smile she wore for strangers instantly gone. Then she quickly turned away, pretending she hadn't seen a thing, her back a wall of indifference. My brother, Ben, followed suit. They ignored me, pretending I was a ghost, a bad memory they had successfully erased. My heart ached, a sharp, familiar pain, but I stood there and I smiled. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My presence there, standing beside Alexander, a man who saw my worth when they did not, was enough. I observed everything. I saw how my family moved through the room, how they laughed at people behind their backs, how they talked about success as if it were a birthright, something they were born with, not something they had to earn. I saw my brother, Ben, slip away and have a quiet conversation with one of Alexander's board members, a man named Vincent Harmon. I recognized the man from the financial files I had been poring over. He was the one who was secretly behind the embezzlement scheme. My mind raced. Was it possible that my brother was involved, or was he simply a pawn in a larger game? A victim of Vincent's deceit? I felt a wave of nausea, a mix of disgust and fear. I had to tell Alexander. I found him and whispered the truth, my voice barely a whisper. Alexander's face was stone cold, a mask of controlled fury. He knew Vincent had been a problem, but he never suspected the extent of the betrayal or the connection to my own family. He thanked me, and we left the party. My family. They never knew what I had just uncovered. They never knew that I had quietly, and without a single word, exposed their own hypocrisy. We worked for the next few days, piecing together the final evidence. It was a race against time. Vincent and his associates were preparing to make a final move, to take over the company, but we were faster. My new understanding of betrayal, of the quiet, insidious way it can fester, had given me an edge. I had discovered a hidden account, a black market fund that Vincent was using to funnel money out of the company. I found a link, an IP address. That led me directly to Vincent's home office. When we presented the evidence to the board, Vincent was speechless. He couldn't deny it. He was a fraud, and his carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. The board voted to remove him immediately. After everything was over, after Vincent was gone and the company was safe, Alexander turned to me. "You didn't just save my company, Elena," he said, his voice soft, his intense eyes holding mine. "You saved me." He confessed that he was lonely, that he had been surrounded by people who only wanted his money, who saw him as a bank account, not a man. He said I was the first person he had ever met who saw him, not his bank account, and that I was the first person who had ever truly helped him without an agenda. "I want you in my life permanently," he said. "Not just as a partner, not just as a friend, but as my family." He pulled out a box, a simple velvet box, and opened it. Inside was a diamond ring. He asked me to marry him. My heart was racing, a frantic drum against my ribs. I had a choice. I could run away, just like I had done with my family. I could keep my distance, protect my heart, remain a lone wolf, or I could stay. I could choose to build a new life, a new family, a family born not of blood or obligation, but of choice and understanding. I said yes. We got married, quietly, without any fanfare. My family didn't attend. They never even knew. They were still living in their world, a world of power and money, but without the one thing that truly mattered: love, loyalty, and connection. Months later, Alexander and I were at a charity gala, a different one this time. My family was there. They saw me across the room, my hand in Alexander's, my son playing happily nearby, a vibrant, joyful sound in the muted room. They saw the flash of the diamond on my finger. They saw that I had not only survived but thrived. They were speechless. Their carefully constructed world, where I was the failed daughter, the tragic story, had crumbled. They had to watch as I, the failure of the family, lived a life they had once denied me. And I didn't have to say a word. I didn't have to apologize. I didn't have to explain. I just stood there, living my life. A living testament to the fact that you can choose your own family, you can build your own happiness, and you can, in the end, find your own peace. And I knew, from that day on. They would never forget me. They could not